Strange Reel returned on May 30th, 1997, or April 25th, 1997 if you were an international player, with Ace Combat 2, the sequel to the commercial success that was Ace Combat, in which the sequel managed to sell over 1 million copies in its lifetime worldwide. Namco focused on upgrading the gameplay and world that was started with the first game and was received by reviewers rather well. They did have to remove some of the things like the 2-player mode, but that did let them focus on making the stages more fun and exciting for the player. The game got a modern re-release on the 3DS of all systems underneath the title of Assault Horizon Legacy, which added in more of the Strange Reel lore that I will be mentioning in the video, and I'll have to play that sometime as it does change a lot of the base game up. Of course, we have to tackle why we are here, and before we jump in, I would like to mention that you'll see gameplay from 2 different playthroughs as there are branching paths in the game. Instead of letting you read the rather long text scroll that is somehow even more desync than last time, seriously, how did you even manage that one, Namco? We are going to our trusty map of Strange Reel. It is May of 1997, and this is the first time in Ace Combat that we will get a definite month, as the first game just said 1995, and there are a lot of months that it could have taken place. In the continent of Usea, the major leaders went off to have a meeting about the world-ending rock that was currently hurtling towards the planet. This is Ulysses 1994 XF04, and will become extremely important to the history of Strange Reel. While they were off figuring out how to deal with the world-ending pebble, the high-ranking military corps of the nation, known as NAP 2700, which honestly just sounds like they were named by Sony's headphone division, threw a coup d'etat which overthrew the entire nation a little bit too easily, forming the Usean rebel forces. In 1998, Scarface Squadron was recalled into action to take care of the rebels. Before we get up into the air, let's take a look at the hangar, as the changes to the sequel actually start right here. Now that we can see our aircraft, the 5-point system is gone, as there are now a couple of new stats added to the page. Instead of 5, we now have 7 of them. The new stat is climbing ability. This judges how high the aircraft can climb before being impacted with stalling. Some aircraft will be low-ceiling fighters and some will be high-ceiling fighters that can go above the clouds. Offense was also split up into air-to-ground and air-to-air combat capabilities. This affects lock-on speed for the missiles, and sadly there are still no special weapons available. The other major thing that they changed was the removal of the life system from the first game. Now, instead of losing an aircraft entirely when shot down or crash, the player loses a small chunk of their money instead. I just like to imagine it's the Usean government glaring at the player as they ask for yet another multi-million-dollar jet because they're trying to show off a cool trick and ended up creating a new reef. But now that we can get up into the air, the first couple missions are the usual affair with shooting down some bombers and cargo planes. But what we can talk about is the gameplay improvements and the mechanics that they added in, as one of them is integral to the game. First off, the major thing that the player will notice is that you can fly in third person and retain most of your gauges. The only thing you will lack is the gun targeting reticle, but everything else is there. It also does help that the graphics are a step up from air combat, as the environments and the aircrafts themselves are more detailed than before. In the second mission is also where they introduce enemy aces, and while Superfly here isn't trying to trap me in a radio tower, they do give the player unique medals for each one they destroy, and if you destroy them, they can grant you rank ups to unlock some really powerful aircraft. And once all of their medals are claimed, the player unlocks the bonus aircraft viewer. And a fun fact, they are also named after various movies or characters in said movies. The third mission introduces a locale that people will recognize if they've played any of the later Ace Combat games: Anchorhead Bay. Thankfully, this time the player isn't interrupted by a set of insane bats, or have to attempt to sink a submarine the size of a small city. Instead, the player just sinks a parked aircraft carrier and calls it a day. This is where they also introduce one of the new mechanics that comes in for the game: alternate missions. In the third mission, the player can choose to sink 2 transport ships when attacking the carrier. If done, a new mission called Opera House will appear, and the player is allowed to swap out Tin Castle for it. No matter which mission the player chooses, however, a familiar mechanic returns: your wingman. But instead of a random aircraft with the call sign of Willie, you get the choice of 2, John/Herbert and K-Edge Nagase, which is a name that we will hear in a later game. Unlike the first game where the rank judges their aggressiveness and flying style, instead they follow the orders you give them, even selecting an aircraft that is fit for those orders. Tin Castle has you bombing a base that the URF is using as a front base. It is pretty simple, as a lot of the stuff is really easy to glide in and shoot, and it shouldn't take you very long. Or if you destroyed those transport ships that I mentioned, you will get Opera House, where you can attack an offshore oil rig, which probably does devastating amounts of damage to the local wildlife, but if BP can do it, so can Scarface. Then an old friend returns. We get a classic canyon run, and while the threat of becoming an imprint on the wall is still there, it isn't as threatening as Ace Combat, where each plane only has one life. At the end of the ravine is the main target, which happens to be a tower, but also a transport plane that unlocks an alternate mission. If destroyed, the player can swap out Midnight Assassin for Bear Tracks. Midnight Assassin, as its namesake says, takes place at night and has the player hunting down some E767s that are equipped with radar jamming equipment. While this jamming does make your radar look a little bit weird, it just acts similar to stealth tech and makes it so the enemies pulse on your radar every so often instead of staying lit up. If you destroy the 767s first, the rest of the mission becomes very easy, as now you can just see where all of the enemies are on your radar. One of the things that I personally love about this mission is the soundtrack for it. Ace Combat, as we have stated before, has a really good soundtrack, but Dead End is this beautiful, ethereal, almost strange song that gives you this sense that something is wrong, but then goes into this drum and bass style beat, and then there's that droning in the background that you hear throughout, and it is close to the sound that is used when you first meet the Arsenal Bird in Ace Combat 7. Bear Tracks sees the player attacking the mines because we don't need the enemy extracting critical resources and getting a nuclear bomb and then proceeding to go scorched earth on the nation around about 8 times. Also an interesting fact, the mission doesn't use the soundtrack that has its namesake, instead using a classic song from Air Combat, and that is Night and Day. It returns, and it sounds even better in Ace Combat 2. Mission 9 just happens to be an escort mission, which I know is every gamer's favorite. You are escorting bombers into Axel Bay to obliterate a shipbuilding facility. During this mission, there are 2 extra things to look out for. One is a red F-14 Tomcat that is normally pretty passive, but can be aggressive towards the player once engaged, and 2 transport ships that are down in the waters below. The red Tomcat will be important later, and the ships unlock a secret split mission, which is way easier than the original mission that the game gives you. Speaking of said mission, Rising High is the standard mission path and sees the player having to fly high into the sky to chase down a very expensive experimental Valkyrie bomber and a couple of SR-71 Blackbirds. I have no idea where the URF managed to get a Valkyrie bomber from, but they did. This is the mission that shows off the 2 planes that the player can traverse in the air, an upper layer where the plane's climbing ability and careful throttle management is important, and the lower layer where you'll be spending 90% of your time in the game. The issue that some may face with this mission is that most of the aircraft that you might have at this point don't really have that great of a climbing ability to push higher into the altitude limit shown by the clouds. The other thing that I had a problem with is that if you stall, your retinas get absolutely destroyed every single time as the screen flashes bright white to signal the transition between the upper layer and the lower layers of the sky. It's literally a flashbang. But thankfully Namco realized this when designing the mission, and while I did manage to take down all 3 of the aircraft, if the player lets them fly off to the edge of the map, the mission won't fail the player, instead you just don't get as much money as a reward. In the other playthrough, the mission that was chosen was Cuckoo's Nest, a mission that is staggeringly simple. It tasks the player with having at least 2 functioning brain cells, one that can fly in a straight line and another that can press the gun button. All it requires is shooting down some supplies with your guns that are falling in a line, and congrats, the mission is completed. I would like to mention that one of the things Ace Combat 2 does with difficulty is change often how many targets the player is tasked with destroying, and sometimes their locations. Speaking of a mission that does that, the mission right after introduces something new once again: non-target buildings. These targets are not to be destroyed, as they are either civilian or important to what you are trying to capture. In this case, you are destroying the defenses for the main buildings, but accidentally destroying one of the non-target buildings won't outright fail the mission, but instead you'll just take a hit to your credits afterwards. Then it's off to a familiar location, one that would become beloved mainly for its soundtrack. We are off to the Kimona Islands. The enemy has stationed an experimental XB-10 bomber in one of 8 convenient hangars. Of course, when you fly in for the first time, the player destroys a random spaceship that is about to be launched, because we don't need any Yuzhin Teslas flying up into space. Now comes the fun part, the main objective. There are 8 hangars in total, and the bomber, no matter the difficulty, is placed randomly in one of those 8. This is the type of RNG that would make a speedrunner cry. What it does do is remind me a lot of the Hangman puzzle from Silent Hill 2, where speedrunners before the RNG of the game was cracked would just blindly walk into the room and choose one of 6 nooses hoping that they got the puzzle right. But instead of a 1 in 6, it's a 1 in 8 chance. But once the bomber is revealed, it just takes 4 missiles to the aircraft and it is no more. Once we are done with Kimona, it is off to the Scully Islands. Yeah, the location from the first Ace Combat game comes back. This time the URF has parked their fleet in the middle of the waters and it is our job to take them out. Now, if you didn't believe that Ace Combat was already inspired by Area 88 and Top Gun, this mission soundtrack would definitely make you start to believe. Fire Young Man is a blend of not only that rock that you would hear from the ladder, but also gives that perfect 90s anime vibe that makes you feel like you are truly the last hero for the world fighting against some cosmic power greater than you. But back to the mission at hand, the ships themselves aren't the hardest thing to take care of, as taking out the main body instantly kills them, unlike in Ace Combat where you had to destroy everything. One of the things to note is that the gunners are either going to have no aim at all, or have the world's greatest gaming chairs and will damage you if you fly anywhere close to the ship, which doesn't help that our missiles are short ranged and we have to get in close to attack anyways. There's also a red F-18 that will fly towards the player on approach, so taking that out is always a good thing to do. But at least the mission is over and we are greeted with another ravine run, this time at night, with water below us that surprisingly has a reflection of the world around us, and it looks rather pretty too. Sadly, it doesn't reflect our aircraft, but that is probably just a limitation of the PS1 at the time. It is also a pretty wide ravine with multiple paths that the player can take, and overall is a pretty simple mission that sees us destroying a submarine at the end of it. With the final mission of the standard path, we are tasked with blowing up the defenses of a geothermal plant without damaging the critical structures around it. Unlike with the arms production base, the weapons protecting it are close to the non-target buildings, so sometimes the approach is making sure you are targeting the right thing before firing. There's also another one of those red aircraft flying around, this time it's an F-22, so take that out for later. I'll also mention here that if you failed to destroy any of the previous red jets from earlier, the ZOE ace that is supposed to be in this mission will be replaced with one of the previous aces, so if you missed the major in Seagull, he will replace the colonel in this mission. And with the destruction of the final building, we are off to a part of the game where Ace Combat 2 sees a little bit more replayability. At this point, the player is given a choice: go with the mission El Dorado and join Operation Alphaville, or go with Dark Star and join Operation Bellissima. This means at least 2 or 4 playthroughs, depending on if the player uses an emulator and save states, could be needed to see both operations through. On the Alphaville side, it starts with the destruction of the enemy's missile silo base. It is a unique ground attack mission as you have to sweep in low and get into the canyon before firing at the exhaust vents. Afterwards, the player is tasked with guarding a group of allied aircraft carriers out of the channel from ground and air forces. There is a secret mission which we managed to get by making sure that all 3 of the aircraft carriers survive the assault. Normally, the player will get visiting hours, which tasks you with a 90-second run into a vent to destroy a geothermal plant. I don't have footage for it because I did Juggernaut instead. This is the secret mission for Alphaville, which tasks us with destroying the URF fleet in a wide open ocean. It really isn't as difficult as Seagull, as you can just target the main part of the ships to get rid of the 6 boats that are targets, and they are spread pretty far apart. But you can't just attack the enemy's mainland with them having so many eyes, so you have to take out the radar installations, but the player cannot use missiles in this mission, so you have to swoop in and use your guns. Thankfully, a short burst of cannon fire takes them out. Then this happened. Huh? It crashed in the victory screen and it still texts me. What the fuck? Yeah, somehow the victory screen crashed my aircraft and it still charged me for blowing up the aircraft. Meanwhile, on the Operation Bellissima side, the first mission tasks the player with taking out some long-range aircraft and their escorts. But your radar is knocked out, not because of a jammer this time, it is because there is a thunderstorm occurring which thankfully your plane cannot get hit by, but it does have an annoying flash effect that hurts the eyes. Afterwards comes a pseudo-stealth mission, and a mission that has 2 options for the player. One is to fly up beyond 600 meters into the air and get spiked, which alerts the enemy and skips the 2 B-2 bombers at the end to unlock the secret mission. or if the player can keep themselves below 600 meters and either winding through the Arctic canyons or almost belly scraping across the tops of some of the ice flows, they can attack the 2 bombers at the end. And I took so long in this mission and actually managed to do the stealth part that I managed to run completely out of ammo, which absolutely surprised me. Oh, now you want to attack me? No, you don't. That's what I thought. No, you get your you get back here. Oh, I ran out of missiles. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna go finish off the mission now. I'm out of missiles, so yeah, main mission we go. Thankfully, the guns are able to destroy the radar stations pretty easily, and with that, we are off to the secret mission for Bellissima. The normal mission you get is a boring one. It is a ground and air defense escort mission, but the mission Electric Dreams, that is the secret one, is also a boring ground attack mission, but at least it's over quickly. The one thing I will point out about the location that this mission takes place, despite being non-canon thanks to the remake in Assault Horizon Legacy, it does bear striking resemblance to the area where Stonehenge is located, and it is in fact a particle lab, so that is another thing that brings that conclusion and ties them together just a little bit, even though they are completely different locations entirely. Now the enemy is on their last leg, and we have to break through their final defenses, and it consists of one XB-10 bomber, and some fighters, and the last remaining parts of their fleet. The fighters do actually prove to be a little bit of a challenge, as in their Su-37 Terminators, they will perform Cobras and attempt falling leaf maneuvers every so often. The mission itself overall isn't too terribly difficult, and once the final ship is destroyed, the paths converge once again on Jewel Box. The enemy has garrisoned their troops in a city that looks oddly like a large gym, fitting for the name of the operation. The player is tasked with a nighttime assault to destroy the highways they are using to launch their aircraft. Not the most difficult thing in the world. The enemy aircraft in the area will occasionally become aggressive towards the player, but overall they aren't too annoying as they just glide around without much of a care in the world. And then it is on to the final mission of the game, Kingpin. It is a beautiful sunset and the enemy is on their last leg. All that stands between you and victory is a few ground troops and their airbase, and of course their headquarters. However, I decided to fly off into the sunset and go hunt down the red F-15S that completes the 4 main ZOE aces. Then I go destroying their airbase, taking out their hangars one by one. Then I swoop low through the city to wipe out their ground forces and one tank that is a little confused when they said to take cover, as it is out in the middle of nowhere. Once they are taken care of, it is just the 5 buildings and then the main headquarters, and Yuzha is saved. The world is at peace and no other threats will happen. Or will they? Remember those 4 red aircraft that we snuck off to destroy? Well, they have a story that isn't really told in the game, and was added afterwards, mostly involving Project Ace's writing team probably trying to find any way they could to tie it into their modern games. These red aircraft are called ZOE, which at first was a movie reference, and now they are something new. So let's go back to our map of Strange Reel. In 1995, the nation of Belka wanted to annex land that was lost in an economic crisis that happened to be in neighboring nations, in particular Ossia, Yuktobania, and Ustio. This would launch what would be called the Belkan War. After many superweapons would fall, and land that was occupied would return to its pre-war status, the Belkan military would detonate 7 nuclear weapons in southwestern Belka, decimating their own land and killing 12,000 of their own civilians. Shortly after this incident, a peace treaty was signed. One of the areas that was lost in the peace treaty to the Ossian Federation was the small city of Sudentor. This contained an arms manufacturer called South Balkan Munitions, now renamed North Ossia Grunder Industries. While Grunder Industries created most of the technology for the Ossian Defense Forces, at this point in the late 1990s, they had been secretly working on 2 notable projects: the ADF-01 Falcon fighter, with its sleek, streamlined body and highly advanced weaponry, and the ZOE, or Zone of Endless AI, a fully autonomous artificial intelligence that is able to study and adapt to various flight styles over repeated engagements. Grunder decided to paint these planes with a bright red crimson color and no nationality markings to make them appear as rogue elements. Downing those 4 ZOE aces unlocks the hidden secret missions afterwards, which is why those aces awarded nothing but money and a medal with a unique design to it. Back to the missions at hand, the last remaining members of the URF are taking a submarine out of the city. It is up to you to make sure there is no chance that a small splinter of them could reform and attack once again. The submarine doesn't take that long to kill, as it is 1 missile for each of its defenses, and then 4 for the main base, but they couldn't let you have an easy victory, as in a last-ditch effort they launch an SLBM. This could have devastating impacts on the city if it reaches it, and then begins one of the more annoying parts of this mission. Using what I am assuming is some Belkin wizardry, they managed to put a jammer into the missile, making it so you cannot target it with missiles, but instead have to use your guns. Now here's where the fun part begins, because the actual fight isn't that hard, it just has a flight pattern that reminds me of the average BMW driver. It turns randomly, and either tries to brake check you or accelerates at random times. If you do fail and the missile gets to the edge of the map, the city just gets destroyed, but thankfully I managed to actually shoot the thing when it flew in a straight line, even if I almost did crash my F-22 into it. Got it. Stupid fucking missile. Got it. Killed it. Hate that missile. Then it's off to the URF secret base, which they nestled into the side of a mountain, this time with an even bigger missile inside of it. The place is swarming with F-15s and the one singular ace, the ZOE commander in the aforementioned ADF-01 Falcon. Thankfully it doesn't have its TLS and goes down rather easily, even if I did take 45% damage from eating a missile from it. Now it's just to take out these substructures around, popping the 6 locks, and destroying the energy infrastructure so that way they can't really use the base that much afterwards. Then, as I was approaching the final tunnel run, I just happened to take a missile in the back of my F-22, leaving me at 95% damage. But I managed to get into the tunnel, and thankfully after a straight flight, I fire 2 missiles and take out the ICBM and fly out the top while it explodes. Now Yuzha is at peace, at least until someone else decides that they don't like them, which seems to be a lot of people when you really look at it. So that was Ace Combat 2. Originally it didn't have any of the plot that I mentioned at all. It was a much more direct game, and much like the first game, it didn't really have a direction, and just wanted to be a game about the player being a cool cream of the crop pilot who defeats the bad guys. Overall, the game is better visually than its predecessor and features a very similar control style, with the only thing I can say that I didn't really like was the whole 2 planes of the sky idea that they did, as there are moments where you'll gently touch the second plane just a little bit, and after getting blinded for half a second, your plane will just suddenly stall and become a brick, and then you hurtle right back down into the lower plane, blinding yourself once again. But at the end of the day, it was the game that later on Project Aces turned into a pivotal point in Ace Combat history, as it gave us the asteroid that would give us games like Ace Combat 4 and Ace Combat 7, but also laid out the groundwork with Grunder Industries being the most determined and legendary antagonistic corporation in all of the Ace Combat universe, creating the fear of Latin that strikes the hearts of pilots everywhere. So is Ace Combat 2 worth playing? Yes, it is extremely fun, and while it is short, only taking around about 1 or 2 hours per playthrough at the most, it is an experience that will not set you up for what comes next. The most ambitious and honestly elaborate Ace Combat game to date, Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching and for all of the support on the Ace Combat videos. I love this franchise if you can't tell. I hold it dearly as it kickstarted a lot of my interest in modern aircraft. The next video will take a little bit to get out, as Ace Combat 3 is a super long game with 56 missions and multiple different endings. So I may check out an Ace Combat like in the meantime just to tide things over so there isn't a month or 2 gap between uploads. This has been Kuro Keat, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.